The next time someone demands an explanation from you, watch how much power you just handed them. This channel exists to amplify your potential, and nothing shrinks that potential faster than a man who over-explains himself. There is a moment that happens to almost every man at least once in his life. You're sitting across from people who claim to love you, family, old friends, a partner, and you're doing something you swore you'd never do again. You're explaining yourself, not sharing, not updating them, explaining, justifying, defending a decision you already made to people who never had to live inside it. Maybe it was a career change. Maybe it was walking away from a relationship everyone else thought was good on paper. Maybe it was simply choosing silence over an argument you knew you'd win. And here's what nobody tells you about that moment. The second you start explaining you've already lost. Not the argument, something bigger than the argument. Picture him. A man in his early 30s, sitting at a dinner table that used to feel like home and now feels like a courtroom. His mother asks why he left the job that everyone was so proud of. His brother asks if he's thought this through. And he does what most of us have been trained to do since childhood. He opens his mouth and starts building a case. Spreadsheets of logic, timelines, reassurances. He is, without realizing it, asking a room full of people for a verdict on a decision that was never theirs to judge. He leaves that dinner exhausted. Not because they disagreed with him, because he handed them the power to judge him. Successful men don't lose that argument, they just refuse to enter it. That's the trap. And almost every man falls into it at least once, because we've been taught that being understood is the same thing as being respected. It isn't. Now picture a different man, 2,000 years earlier, not at a dinner table, on a battlefield, in a tent, writing by candlelight to no one but himself. Marcus Aurelius ruled the most powerful empire on earth, and he did it while being second-guessed by senators, generals, and his own family, every single day of his reign. He never wrote a single line defending his choices to them. Not one. Here's what most people get wrong about the book he left behind, the one we now call Meditations. It wasn't a speech. It wasn't written for anyone else to read. He never even meant for it to be published. It was just his own private notebook. Every night, he wrote short notes to himself, reminding himself of the same thing over and over. Other people's opinions of his decisions were not his job to manage. That a man who needs the crowd to understand him has already made the crowd his master. He didn't ignore criticism because he was arrogant. He ignored it because he understood something most of us never learn until it's cost us years. Explanation is a request for permission, and an emperor, or a man building any life worth having, doesn't request permission for the decisions only he has to live with. An empire never asked Marcus Aurelius to explain himself. Neither should your life ask that of you. Say that back to yourself for a second. Explanation is a request for permission. Every time you catch yourself over-explaining a decision to someone who wasn't going to live with the consequences of it, you were quietly asking them to approve of you. This shows up everywhere. Not just at dinner tables. Think of the artist who used to send a paragraph of context with every piece of work. Here's what I was going through. Here's why I made this choice. I know it's different, but... At some point, the ones who actually make it stop doing that. Not because they stop caring about the work, because they realize the work either speaks or it doesn't, and no caption fixes that. Think of the founder in a pitch meeting, over-justifying a pivot to investors who've never built anything themselves. The ones who raise the next round aren't the ones with the best explanation. They're the ones who say the decision once, plainly, and then talk about where they're going next. Think of the man ending a relationship that everyone insists he should at least try to fix. He doesn't owe anyone a courtroom transcript of every conversation that led him here. He says it once, kindly, if he can, clearly, always. And then he lets the silence do what words can't. He lets people watch what he does next, instead of listening to why he did what he did. Notice the pattern, the artist, the founder, the man walking away. None of them changed their lives because they found better words. They changed them the day they stopped searching for approval. Confidence doesn't explain. Confidence just moves. Here's the part that's harder to hear. You're doing it right now, aren't you? Somewhere in your head, a conversation is still running. The one where you finally say the thing that makes them get it. Most of us don't over-explain because we're weak. We over-explain because somewhere along the way, we were taught that love and approval were conditional on being understood. A parent who only softened once you justified yourself well enough. A teacher who only gave credit when the reasoning was airtight. A culture that rewards the loudest defense, not the quietest conviction. So we grew into men who think if we can just find the right words, the right sequence of logic, everyone will finally see it our way, and then finally we'll be allowed to just live. But that day never comes. There is no perfect explanation that ends the questioning. There's only the moment you stop offering one. And here's the darker truth underneath that. The people who most need your explanation are very often the people least entitled to it. Not because they're bad people, but because your life was never a democracy they were entitled to vote in. You are the only person who has to wake up inside the consequences of your choices. Not your mother, not your brother, not the group chat with opinions about your relationship. You. Which means you are the only one who gets to ask why. Successful men aren't the ones with no critics. They're the ones who stopped answering to them. Let that sit for a second before we move. Say this with me. Not as a performance, but as a decision you're making right now. Say it slowly. I do not owe an explanation for the life I am building. My silence is not arrogance, it is ownership. I move, I do not defend. Whoever needs proof will get it from what I build, not from what I say. Feel that. Not as a mantra you repeat and forget. As a decision you make once, and then live inside, the way Marcus Aurelius lived inside his. That's what amplifying your potential actually looks like, not more noise, less of it. So what do you actually do with this? Tonight, not someday? Pick one decision you've been over-explaining. 1. The job, the relationship, the move, the no you keep re-justifying every time someone brings it up. And the next time it comes up, you don't argue, you don't build the case again. You say it once, plainly. This is what I'm doing. And then you change the subject to where you're headed next. That's it. That's the whole rep. Do it once, and you'll feel something shift. Because the moment you stop performing your reasoning, you stop needing their permission to keep going. 1 rep. That's how potential actually gets amplified. 1 decision you stop defending, at a time. That's the whole game. Most men never learn it, and the ones who do, you can spot them from across the room. They're not the loudest ones in the argument, they're the ones who were never in it. People don't respect explanations, they respect certainty. And certainty never asks for a witness. The man who explains himself is still, quietly, asking to be forgiven for existing on his own terms. The man who doesn't, he's already gone, already building, already 3 moves ahead of the conversation everyone else is still having about him. This is why successful men never explain themselves. Their results are already doing the talking, 3 rooms ahead of the one they left. Be that man. If this reached something in you tonight, if some part of you just recognized a dinner table, a group chat, a relationship you've been quietly defending for too long, that recognition is the whole reason ZestifyUp exists. We're not here to comfort you into staying the same. We're here to hand you the words for the version of yourself you've been circling for years, so that one day soon, you stop explaining him and just become him. That's what it means to amplify your potential. Before you go, tell me in the comments, what's the one decision you've been over-explaining to someone who was never entitled to a reason? Don't just think it, type it. Say it once, right there in the comments, and let that be the last time you feel the need to justify it. We'll see you in the next one, where we get into the one thing that's even harder to stop explaining than your decisions, your silence itself.